Hello, and welcome to the informational session for CASA. We're so glad that you're here, and thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about what it means to provide a voice for a child in foster care. Now, before we get started, I want to introduce our team because they make everything that we do possible, and we would not be able to serve the community in the way that we do without their support. Our executive director is Susie Weller. Susie started with the CASA program originally and then became our executive director a few years ago. And I'll talk more about the difference between Children First and CASA and the other programs that are housed under Children First in the next slide. Emily Dant is our program director. She has been with CASA since 2017, and prior to that, she was an intern with a program that used to be under Children First called Family Time. She has her bachelor's in psychology. John Kirkpatrick is our CASA program support coordinator. He is a former volunteer with CASA and has been brought on part-time as of 2022 and provides a lot of support to the program as a whole, but especially Emily in all of her tasks as program director. Allison Lang is one of our CASA advocacy coordinators. She comes to us from a domestic violence shelter in Dahlonega and graduated from the University of North Georgia. Courtney Thurston is also an advocacy coordinator. She has been with us for a couple of years now and previously worked for Barrow County DFACS. She has her master's in social work. And finally, Tasha Nicholson is our last CASA advocacy coordinator, and she is a former volunteer as well as a former para-pro in the school system. So I give a little bit of background with all of these individuals just to say that when it comes to this team, they have a wealth of experience. And what I tell people is either they will be able to answer your questions or they will definitely be able to find the answer to your questions. So moving on to Children First and CASA. So Children First is an umbrella organization. Originally, Athens-Oconee CASA was the first program that started in Athens in 1991. And being a nonprofit, we are run by a board of directors. And after a couple of years of serving the community as just a CASA program, the board of directors at the time decided that they wanted to provide more services to families in our community. And so they decided to become Children First. Athens-Oconee CASA is the largest program housed under Children First, but we do have two other programs that provide a lot of support to our community as well. Safe Care is an evidence-based parenting curriculum. They serve parents of children ages 0 to 5. They go through different modules that help parents, specifically newer parents, with things like hygiene, how to baby-proof your home, and how to just track your child's developmental progress. They're utilized a lot by the Department of Family and Children's Services, whether those parents have a foster care case or some other DFACS involvement. The other program housed under Children First is SPARK, which stands for Supportive Parenting Access Resource Center. SPARK is a long name for a small program in that there is only one full-time staff currently working with the SPARK program, Rob Turner, but he covers a number of communities throughout North Georgia and helps non-custodial parents get visitation rights. So you may or may not know this, but in the state of Georgia, if you are a father to a child and you are not married to the mother of that child at the time of birth, even if your name is on the birth certificate, you actually do not have a legal relationship with that child. So when it comes to getting access for visits, it can be difficult when there's not a legal relationship established. Spark helps get that process started, as well as helps establish that legal relationship by starting the legitimation process. And then CASA, which of course we're going to talk more about, and I will read our mission before we move on to the next slide. The mission of Athens-Oconee CASA is to assist the court by providing trained, screened, and supervised volunteers from diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds to advocate for the best interest of abused and/or neglected children in appropriate court proceedings in the Western Judicial Circuit of Georgia, in the social service system, and with community service providers, thus assuring those children's right to an appropriate placement, transition to a permanent home, and thus improving the system's treatment of this vulnerable population. So I think, it's important to give more context for our organization. And so I want to share with you all some of our goals for this year. We have a goal of serving 60% of the children in foster care within our counties by the end of 2023. Now, at this time, we are serving around 45% of the children, which is a little under half, and we want to reach that 60% coverage and hopefully one day reach 100%. That is the ultimate goal. But we believe that with the track that we are on this year and getting new volunteers in, such as yourself potentially, we can get up to 60%, potentially even more by the end of the year. We also have a huge focus on volunteer retention. We want to retain no less than 80% of our current volunteer pool. With that, each volunteer is an investment. This is an investment for our children as well as an investment for the volunteer. And as we will talk about throughout this presentation, it is no easy task to take on this work as well as to go through the training process. And so once a volunteer is sworn in and takes a case, the minimum requirement is that they stay on for at least 12 months, preferably the life of the case. But we do have a good bit of volunteers who decide that they want to stay on and work more cases. We've had volunteers who have been with us for a number of years now. And with the years that pass as they continue to be a volunteer and continue to take cases, their ability to advocate and further support staff increases. And so our hope is that we will raise our retention rates so that we can have that wealth of experienced volunteers. We also want to work on transitioning back into the office. The pandemic is somewhat behind us, but we are still very much so feeling its effects. And so if you come by our office on any given day, you're not necessarily guaranteed to see any of the CASA staff in the office. But our hope is that we're going to be in the office more so that we can, one, work together as staff and also be able to interact with our community as well as our volunteers. And then finally, developing a plan for office expansion. So if you were to see all staff, plus all the interns that work in the office, and then clients and volunteers who come in and out throughout the day, you would notice that we have outgrown our space. We currently reside in a house off North Pope Street that has been formatted into an office space, and we are bursting at the seams there. So office expansion, whether it be building on what we already have or finding a new location, is a dream for us in the near future. Definitely not for 2023, but discussions are being had by our board at this time. So the current state of foster care in our community, I already covered a little bit about what our organization does. Right now, we have around 78 active volunteers. So those 78 volunteers are serving, like I said, around 45 to 50% of the children in foster care. And we have around 300 children total who are in foster care at this time. So that means we are serving around 150 children, which is amazing. We are very, very proud of our CASA volunteers and the advocacy that they provide. But on the flip side, that also means that there are about 150 children right now who do not have a CASA assigned to their case and do not have someone who is providing a voice for them. So that makes it very clear why we have a need for individuals like you to join us and swear in as CASAs and work cases. Now, of course, I understand that you may hear this presentation today and decide that this is not the right volunteer opportunity to you, and that is totally okay. I know that this is a big ask. It is a unique volunteer opportunity, and there is a level of personalness in this work. It's going to be something that takes a little bit out of you emotionally. Now, there are other ways that you can be involved with our organization. So as I mentioned already, we are run by a board of directors, and so that is another volunteer role within our organization. Board members are sworn in for a term of 3 years, and they help with the overall functioning of the organization. And if a board position does not sound like it's a good fit for you, we also have open committee positions. We need members on committees for things like event planning or advertising or fundraising. If you are looking to get involved in the overall functioning of a nonprofit, we will find a place for you. And you can find more information about that on the Children First website. And then we also have intern positions available, both with Children First and CASA. We would not be able to do what we do without interns. They are a mighty workforce that is behind the scenes, even behind the scenes of staff, to be able to get us through each day, doing things like taking notes in court, helping us facilitate CASA training, going to different community meetings, and so on. So a volunteer opportunity as an intern, it can be just as impactful in a different way as being a CASA volunteer. So I talked about all the different things that make up our organization's staff, our different programs, different volunteer opportunities. But of course, you are here to learn more about what it means to be a CASA volunteer. So CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate, which is a community volunteer who helps advocate for children in foster care. We at Athens-Oconee CASA strongly believe that anyone can be a CASA volunteer. Our volunteer base right now is made up of retired individuals, full-time students, working adults, stay-at-home parents, and so on. All we really need is for someone who has a passion to serve children in our community. But backing it up a little bit, I want to explain what foster care is. Personally, when I started with this organization, I had an understanding of foster care that was ignorant. I thought that foster care meant adoption and that that was an amazing thing, and it is. But there is so much more to foster care than adoption. Foster care is a temporary solution for a family when that family has a situation going on that makes it unsafe for the child to remain in the home. So, how a child comes into foster care is that a report of abuse or neglect is made to the Department of Family and Children's Services, or DFACS, and a DFACS case manager is sent out to the home to assess whether or not that child can stay in the home safely. So, when a child comes into foster care, it has been deemed that that child is no longer safe in the home. For example, we do have a lot of cases in our area that have substance abuse as an issue. Whether substance abuse is the primary case issue or it is a secondary issue, such as using substances to treat mental health. Once that child enters into care, it is possible that they could be placed anywhere in the state of Georgia. So you may have a child who comes into care in Athens and they could be placed all the way in Macon or Savannah. Now, the hope is that we can place them within their local community and potentially with a relative or a family friend. But of course, we don't control when children come into care or what resources are available at that time. So we do have children who are placed out of their area, and that actually incurs more trauma. You have a child who is not only being taken away from their parents in the home that they know, but they could be placed in a new school, potentially with strangers. And so that is a huge upheaval for a child and can definitely cause a lot of instability for them. So when that child comes into care, a case plan is put into effect so that parents can work services to hopefully get that child home. We at CASA believe that it is in the child's best interest to be reunified with their parents if possible, as long as those parents are working services to mitigate and correct the situation that brought that child into foster care. So what comprises a case plan is different services that address the issue that brought that child into care. And this is all coordinated and referred by the Department of Family and Children's Services. So for example, I mentioned substance abuse. If you have a parent who is struggling with substance abuse, then they would be expected to do things like drug screens. They may need to go seek some kind of treatment, whether it be inpatient treatment or outpatient treatment. They most likely will be referred for therapy. They will likely have to have visits that are supervised with their kids, and so someone will have to be referred to supervise those visits. And there can be more services that are put into place as they work their case. Now, also, the child, when they enter into care, may need services too. So, when a child enters into care, they also most likely are going to be put into therapy if they're old enough. They may need educational services. They may need to go see a doctor, have vaccines if those are not up to date. They may need different things like assessments done, which we would talk more about during CASA training. And so it's a lot of different things that have to be coordinated. And again, this is all being coordinated by the DFACS case manager. And so it's not necessarily just one child coming into care or dealing with one parent. You can be dealing with multiple parents, and you can have a sibling group that's potentially as large as 6 kids. And so getting all of those services put into place is a lot of work for one family. DFACS case managers are potentially overseeing 20 to 30 families at any given time. Now, speaking on DFACS at this current place in time, there is definitely a lot of struggle throughout our state. We are dealing with a lot of turnover, and the DFACS case managers who are still with us are overworked and overwhelmed with the amount of responsibility that is being put on their plate. So, how do we help? This is where CASAs come in. CASAs are community volunteers who are working with one family, one sibling group, and have the time and attention that can be paid to a family to hopefully prevent things from falling through the cracks. They're there to act as the voice for that child. And so CASAs are there to visit with the child as well as other people on the case and hopefully play that connecting role with everybody who is involved. Because when you have so many people involved, it's very easy for things to get missed or for gaps to open up. So the expectation for CASA volunteers is that they are visiting with their child or children at least once a month. Now, of course, our CASAs are welcome to see them more than once a month, especially when they're first establishing that relationship, but we would like for you to see them in a variety of different settings. So CASAs can go visit them in the foster home or the relative placement where they are. They could go and see them while they're visiting with their parents. They could even go and eat lunch with them at school. The hope is that you're going to be able to go in person and develop a relationship with a child, as well as observing what is going on in their life and in the case at the time. You're also going to be expected to speak to the child's parents, their foster parents, and all of those providers that I mentioned earlier. So, as a CASA, you have an insane amount of access to this family's life and everything that's going on. And so, part of your role as a CASA volunteer is to collect that information so that you can provide updates to the court, as well as collecting information to provide in the field advocacy. So speaking to the foster parents, asking how is the child doing in the foster home, talking to the teacher, figuring out, okay, how are they doing? Are they struggling in reading? Are they doing well in math? And then talking to the biological parents and having a relationship with them as well so that you can track their case progress, and talking to their therapists or whoever is providing treatment for them if they're dealing with substance use. It's a lot of information gathering, and being able to put all of that information into a CASA report is a huge role and part of what it means to be a CASA volunteer. CASAs are sometimes the only stable adult in a child's life. So I mentioned earlier that there's a good deal of turnover at DFACS. Throughout the child welfare system in general, you deal with a lot of turnover. So children could be encountering different therapists, they could be moved to different schools, they could be placed with a different foster parent. And so this is a lot of adults coming in and out of a child's life when they are already in a space that is very stressful. And so being able to be that consistent adult for them, that consistent person who continues to show up, helps build their resilience, which is how we combat trauma. And then when cases have a CASA assigned, they reach permanency faster. So National CASA did a study in 2017, and they found that on average, when a CASA is assigned to a case, that case closes 6 months faster. And think about a young child. 6 months is a very long time. So being able to shave even that off of a child's time in foster care can mean a big deal. So I talked a lot about gathering information as you are speaking with all these different people who are involved in a case. And so, like I said, that information can be used while you are in the field to help people communicate with each other. For example, helping a teacher understand better what's going on for a child. Sometimes teachers don't even know that children are in foster care. That's information that you can help by sharing with them. But a primary role for us as CASAs is putting this information that you're gathering into a CASA report, which is a document that is submitted to the court every time that we go to a hearing for a child's case. So when you are writing that CASA report, you are taking all of that information that you've gathered and providing a snapshot of what's going on for the child and their parents and the case as a whole at that point in time. That CASA report is then shared with the judge, as well as DFACs and all the attorneys who are assigned to a case. Using this report is something that can make a real difference during a hearing. We as CASAs are gathering information that may not be presented in court if we had not been present. And so there's times where information is brought up that would not have been brought up during a hearing unless a CASA was assigned and had submitted a report. And it helps connect everyone and provide that holistic view of what's going on. Along with that report, you are making recommendations for things that you think need to happen in a case. Now, this is not something you are doing in isolation. You have the full support of staff when you are writing these reports. No report leaves the CASA office without staff members having their eyes on it. And we are there as a resource for you to go back and forth with editing a report before it's submitted to the court. Now, with recommendations, not only are you able to talk to staff, but you're going to know your case and have people that you can reach out to for professional input on things that you think should happen for the case. For example, if there's needs in the classroom, you can reach out to the teacher. If there are needs for the child emotionally or mentally, you can reach out to their therapist. There are resources available to you so that you can make sure you're making informed recommendations. And recommendations are always backed up by the content and the body of your CASA report. So you'll see on the screen different puzzle pieces that have example recommendations. And so the first one there says Sally should see an eye doctor. This is a very simple recommendation, and it is something that you can easily include in your report to hopefully get Sally to the eye doctor. Maybe her teacher says that she's having trouble seeing the board at school. That's something that we can include in our report so that DFACs and everyone else is aware that this is a need for Sally. You'll see some acronyms on the screen, such as BMO or BFA. You'll find out quickly if you go through CASA training that we have a whole language that you'll learn. And don't worry, you'll get a guide for all the different acronyms. But BMO means birth mother and BFA means birth father. As a CASA volunteer, if you are staying on for the life of the case, there will come a point in time where you are making a recommendation on whether or not this child should go home. And that is a very weighty decision and not something that is made lightly. And so when you make a recommendation such as BMO should move towards unsupervised visits, that means that things are looking like we are moving in a positive direction towards reunification. If mom is okay to have unsupervised contact with our child, then hopefully we can get to a point where we're comfortable with the child being back in the mother's home. Now you'll see on the bottom of the screen in the right-hand corner that it says TPR should be pursued on BFA. TPR stands for termination of parental rights, which is effectively the death penalty when it comes to juvenile law. Termination of parental rights is what happens when a child's legal relationship with their parent is being severed for purposes of adoption. In order for a child to be adopted, there has to be a severing of that relationship. TPR is a decision that is made when we feel that the odds for reunification are not good, whether that be because parents are not present in the case or they're not working services. And again, none of these recommendations are things that you are doing by yourself or without a lot of knowledge. It takes time to get to the point of reaching permanency. On average, our cases are in care for about 2 to 2.5 years. And the hope is that as you are learning the case and learning the people who are involved, you will become more confident in making a recommendation for what is in the best interest of a child. So what does it look like to be a CASA? I talked about the different roles and responsibilities that CASAs have, but what does it actually look like logistically? So once you go through CASA training, which is a 5-week process that I'll talk a little bit about more further on in the presentation, you will have the opportunity to choose the case that you're working with. Now, a lot of times we tell people that the case chooses the volunteer. You'll be able to give us your preferences, such as location, age, case subject matter, and we'll give you different case files that match up with those as best as we're able. And as you are reading through those case files, you have the opportunity to decide which family you want to work with. A lot of our CASAs say that a specific case ends up calling to them. There's something either in the notes or maybe you've had the opportunity to view a hearing for this child that speaks to you and you want to become involved. And so from that point, when you take a case, you are expected to see your child monthly. And on average, our CASAs are spending about 10 to 20 hours a month working on their case. Now, 20 is definitely high, and that may be when you're preparing your first CASA report or you're first getting involved in a case, because there are a lot of people that you have to meet and establish relationships with. But one of the things about this volunteer opportunity that is unique is that it's very flexible once you swear in and take a case. Our CASAs work their case on their own time. So, for example, if you're busy during the day, you have a job 9 to 5, then you do your CASA work in the evenings or on the weekends. The only thing that we are unable to control is when court hearings are scheduled. But court hearings, we get a significant amount of advance notice, and they only happen once every 4 to 6 months. Now, once you've had the opportunity to establish relationships with everybody, a lot of your casework is going to look like phone calls and emails. You're not always going to have to go out to a location to meet with somebody. But of course, that opportunity is available to you, not just for the child, but hopefully with the parents and other providers on the case. So, what does it mean to be a successful CASA? We've been doing this work for a really long time and have put a lot of thought into what makes someone successful in this role. You have to be someone who seeks cooperative solutions by acting as a facilitator among parties. A lot of times, you are going to be the holder of all the information. There's going to be so many different people who are involved that don't have all the information that you have. It can be as simple as putting two people on an email chain that need to speak to each other or sharing information. Just like I mentioned earlier, it could be something as simple as telling a teacher that their child is in foster care. You have to be willing to accept supervision, training, and evaluation from staff. There is a lot of supervision and guidance in this role. We understand that you're a volunteer. You may not have a history in child welfare or juvenile court. And so we as staff are here to help you and guide you and tell you when to pull back or maybe when you need to push or think outside of the box. You have to appear at all hearings to advocate for the child's best interests and provide testimony when necessary. So, like I said, when court hearings happen, you're submitting that CASA report, but you also are expected to show up to those hearings and be prepared to testify. Now, you are not going to those hearings by yourself. Staff will be there with you and they'll be taking notes and available to answer any questions you may have. But when you are testifying, the only things that you can be questioned are what's in your CASA report. So as long as you are confident in the material that has been submitted, you should have no concerns about testifying. And trust me, it is not like they show you on TV. It is a very friendly courtroom as far as courtrooms go. You have to provide at every hearing reports which include findings and recommendations. You must be a dedicated child advocate willing to learn the best possible means to ensure that the needs of the children in the Clarke and Oconee juvenile justice systems are being met. With that, we will give you a run through of all the different topics that could come up in your CASA work. But of course, we're not going to be able to educate you on the specific unique case subject matter that's going to be present when you take a case. With that, we ask that you continue to educate yourself. We have a requirement for all our volunteers that they complete at least 10 hours of in-service education throughout the course of a year. Now, these are things that we can make available to you, or you may be educating yourself by looking up different webinars or videos. But being able to educate yourself on the specific issues that pertain to your case so that you can be a better advocate. And then finally, advocate for the child's best interests in the community by interfacing with mental health, educational, and other community systems to assure that a child's needs in these areas are being met. So when you take a case, you may find that there are people who are more willing to talk to you than others. That may be a foster parent who's able to tell you all the different things that are going on with the child in terms of medical, educational, mental health wise, etc. And that can be great as a source of information. But as CASAs, we are there to observe and hopefully get more information from those people who are reporting it. So not relying just on the foster parent for that information, but also going out and speaking to the doctors and the therapists and the teachers and going and observing firsthand so that you have that information to report back to the court. So there are some general CASA requirements that we have in terms of being able to go through the training. And so one of those is you have to complete all components of training on time. Deadlines are a big thing in our world, especially when it comes to that court report. You have to submit it within a certain time frame, or else we run the risk of it not being submitted into evidence. And so deadlines are also a big component of training. We have different writing assignments because we teach you how to write the CASA report. You'll have Moodle work, which is an online curriculum that follows along with our in-person class sessions. And then you will have to do court observations. Now, court observations are probably some of people's favorite parts of CASA training because you have the opportunity to actually go and view court when it's happening in real time. And you'll be able to see court hearings that either have a CASA assigned or don't have a CASA assigned. You have to see your CASA child at least once a month. This is a big deal for us. Not only is it a requirement for us to be able to get grant funding for our volunteers, but also if you are going to be an advocate for a child, then you have to be up to date on what's going on in their life. Like I mentioned, you have to get 12 hours of continuing education a year. Like I said, we offer different opportunities and trainings through our office, but this is super easy to get. You can watch a movie, you can read a book, you can take a class. As long as it relates in some way to your casework, we'll count it as in service. You have to complete a comprehensive background screening. So we are the gateway to very vulnerable children. And with that, we go through a very intense screening process. Once you are accepted into training, you'll be expected to fill out background screening documents. And then while you are in training, you'll be expected to be fingerprinted. You have to have access to transportation, personal phone, personal computer with video chat, personal email, and Microsoft Word. Now, all of these different technology requirements have to be personal because this work is confidential. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to talk about CASA work specifically with your friends and family, which can be really difficult. But being able to have personal access that isn't available to others in your life is important so that we can keep people's case matters private. You must make a year-long or life of the case commitment. You do have to be at least 21 years old. Now, we have had folks who are 20 go through the program and swear in once they turn 21 if their 21st birthday is not too far out from our original swearing in date. And then finally, you have to have the ability to respect individuals from various backgrounds and lifestyles in a variety of settings. With this, you are going to meet people from all walks of life, whether it be during training or on your case. And so being able to approach them non-judgmentally and as a peer is very important for successful CASA work. So training expectations. To give you a little bit more information about training logistically, training is a 5-week process and we generally meet on Thursdays. With that, we offer a morning session from 10 to 1:45 and also an evening session from 5:30 to 9:15. We do this so that we can accommodate people's schedules and you aren't tied to any one class. You can either attend in the morning for the entirety of training, or you can hop back and forth as it fits your schedule. Now, when you are going through training, we ask that you are there on time, paying attention, and you can only miss one training class. Otherwise, we would ask you to move on to a different session in the year. Now, when you are going through training, I talked about all the different assignments that may take place, but we are going to have different speakers that come in from the community to share with you, as well as different activities in training that will help you prepare to be a CASA. So when you are in CASA training, you're going to have your personal beliefs and biases challenged. CASA volunteers are supposed to be objective, unbiased advocates, which sounds like a little bit of a conundrum. How can someone advocate objectively? This is something that is, again, unique about our role. And so we know that everybody comes in with their own personal beliefs and biases, especially about how children should be raised and treated. Those are going to be addressed in training, and it can be uncomfortable. We're going to push you. One activity in particular that can be difficult for people is that we do role play. We'll role play different case scenarios and challenge you in those to put you outside of your comfort zone. Now, it may come across as silly or it may feel like we're putting you in the hot seat, but the purpose of that activity is to help you practice actual conversations that could come up when you are on a case. During training, you will receive feedback and constructive criticism. Staff is there to support you, and if you are in training, that means that we believe you have the capability to take on this role. We want to put you out into this world as the best volunteer possible, also because you're going to be a representative of our program. We do check-ins with each of our volunteers throughout the course of training, and we talk about different growth points and also areas in which you're doing well. And this is the opportunity for you to be able to share with us how you think training is going too. You have to communicate with staff. This is a long-term commitment and there is a lot of work involved in it. And so we understand that things are going to continue to happen in your personal life. Let us know what's going on with you and if you think it may impact your work as a CASA or your ability to be in training. Things happen. You have vacations, you could get a new job, you may move. All of these things are stuff that staff needs to know so that we can talk about it and figure out what is the best path forward. You have to adhere to homework deadlines because it's going to speak to your ability to do your casework, as I mentioned earlier. And then once you are a CASA, this work is confidential. Like I mentioned, you're unable to share it with your friends and family. Now, we understand that it is important for folks to be able to verbally process things that are going on in their case, and staff is there to talk with you about things that happen and troubleshoot any issues that come up. But also, we do have a volunteer-led support group that meets every other week called CASA Connections, and that is a space where staff is not present, and it is just volunteers talking about casework, whether it be to vent or look for potential solutions. And then finally, it is important to remember that this work isn't about you, it's about the child or the children you are working for. This is not glamorous work. You are not going to be in the limelight, and you're not always going to get the pat on the back that you deserve. But that's not why we're here, and that's not why this is something that was of interest to you. You are here because you want to make a difference in a child's life. And if you swear in and take a case, I can promise you that is something that's going to happen. Every single CASA who works a case, no matter how small the difference is, there is a difference that's going to impact a child's life positively. So I've shared a lot about what CASA is and what it means to become a CASA volunteer, how you can go about that process of going through training. So there are definitely a lot of things to consider. Of course, we are here to answer any questions you may have. You can go to our website, www.athensoconeecasa.org, or you can email us at info@athensoconeecasa.org. Now, please take time to consider what this would look like in your life. It is a responsibility that is going to be added on top of everything you have right now. Is this work something you think you can handle emotionally? Can you fit the CASA training time requirement into your schedule? What is your learning style? We're going to be covering information very quickly. In training, people often equate training to a college hybrid course. But of course, above all else, we really, really appreciate that you've taken the time to learn about what we do and have a desire to be a part of it. If you are wondering about what it would look like for you to take on this role, I would encourage you either to reach out and ask staff any questions that you may have, or go ahead and fill out an application so that we can schedule an interview with you. In that interview, we'll have the opportunity to go back and forth and talk about what would this look like to be a part of your life specifically. We have been doing this work for a very long time and have a good gauge on what it takes to do it. And so I would say if you're interested, at least fill out an application. But of course, again, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. Being aware of the needs of foster care in our community makes a huge difference in and of itself. And so even if this isn't the right opportunity for you, we appreciate you taking the time and hope to hear from you soon.